For Wednesday, February the 16th. And we're gonna go ahead and start with a roll call. Here. Present. Here. Here. Present. We need a motion to excuse Board Member Campero and Flores.
Make a motion.
A motion, Mr. Hernandez, second, Mr. Martinez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Now please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation by Luis.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Dear God, we come today to bow our heads and open this meeting in prayer. We ask that you would bless our city and that you would bless our time together today. May we grasp those things that you want us to understand. May our hearts always be ready to respond to you and your wisdom. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
We're gonna go ahead and start with the Director's Administrative Report. Line item A, Crossings and Revenues Report for January 22nd, 2022.
Good afternoon, board members, chairman, city officials. For the record, Fred Brown, Director of Operations at the Pharr Bridge. I'd like to present the crossings and revenues for the month of January, fiscal year 2021-2022. On page number 3, we have the car crossings. These are cars that are traveling from US to Mexico through the Pharr Bridge. For the month of January, we crossed a total of 35,684 cars, which represents a decrease of 12,558. We show a decrease of 26.03% decrease for the month of January. From other ports of entry, I'd like to share also the crossing from other ports of entry. We have for cars, we have Gateway, an increase of 41%, Veterans, an increase of 41%, Free Trade Los Indios, an increase of 27%. Total crossings, 64,000, increase 64,655, an increase of 39%. Eagle Pass had an increase of 60,424, 45% increase. Laredo Bridge, they had an increase of 113,505, 55% increase. Hidalgo Bridge, an increase of 86,891, 81% increase. And Salduas Bridge, a increase of 33,503, an increase of 61%. Progreso Bridge, they had a decrease of 1,691, a decrease of 4.30%. Donna Bridge, they had an increase of 12,617, an increase of 45.30%. And again, the Pharr Bridge, we had a decrease of 12,558, a decrease of 26.03%. On page number 4, we have the truck crossings. These are trucks that are traveling from US to Mexico through the Pharr Bridge. Total crossings, we crossed a total of 66,821 crossings, which represents an increase of 4,003 trucks, or an increase of 6.37%. Overall, from October to January, the first quarter, total crossings, we crossed a total of 262,342 crossings, which represents an increase of 26,301 crossings, or an increase of 11.14% for the month for the first quarter from October to January. On trucks from other ports of entry, we have Better en Los Tomates. They had a decrease of 905 trucks, which represents a decrease of 4%. Free Trade Los Indios, they had a decrease of 744 trucks, a decrease of 45%. A combination of both bridges, a decrease of 1,649 crossings, or a decrease of 7%. Eagle Pass, they had a decrease on trucks of 652 crossings, or a decrease of 4%. Laredo Bridge, they had an increase of 10,865, or an increase of 6%. Pharr Bridge, we had an increase of 4,003 trucks, or an increase of 6%. Progreso Bridge, they had an increase of 247 crossings, an increase of 5%. And Salduas Bridge, they had an increase of 465 crossings, 30% increase, an average of 65 trucks per day, Monday to Friday. And Salduas Bridge. Base number 5, we have the northbound truck crossing. These are trucks that are traveling from Mexico to the US through the Pharr Bridge. Total crossing for the month of January, we crossed a total of 57,439 crossings, which represents a decrease of 3,105 crossings, or a decrease of 5.13% decrease. On the agriculture side, the Pharr International Bridge total 21,275 crossings for the month of January, representing 36% of all the imports that are coming from Mexico to the US. As well, on the agriculture side, the Pharr International Bridge import lot show an increase of 1,070 crossings, or 5.30% over the same month period in fiscal year 2020-2021. Page number 6, we have the combination of both southbound and northbound. For the month of January, northbound and southbound, a combination of both crossings, we total 124,260 crossings, or an increase of 898, or an increase of 0.73%. On page number 7, we have the revenues. Total revenue collected for the month of January, we collected a total $1,496,333, which represents an increase of 43,433, or an increase of 2.99%. Overall, from October to January on the first quarter, we collected a total of $5,869,766, which represents an increase of $311,422, or an increase of 5.60%. And on page number 8, we have the total crossings by axles. For the month of January, we crossed a total of 36,032 cars, 2-axle trucks, 2,710, 3-axle trucks, 4,222, 4-axle trucks, 1,337, 5-axle trucks, 48,502, 6-axle trucks, 9,611, mobile homes, we crossed 4, wide loads, 58, special crossing, 29. Total crossings, 102,505 crossings for the month of January. Chairman, this concludes my reports. If you have any questions.
The obvious question is the cars, but we're continuing to operate on limited hours, I'm assuming. And
That is correct, Chairman. Again, we have the same hours of operation Monday to Friday. Southbound, we open from 6 in the morning to 8 in the morning, and then in the afternoon, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. On the weekends, we open against northbound, coming from Mexico to the U.S., from 6 to 8 in the morning, then in the afternoon, 4 p.m. to 12 midnight. Southbound, going into Mexico, we open 6 in the morning to 12 midnight for cars.
And January will be the second complete month that the border has opened for non-essentials, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Have any other questions?
Real quick, Carla, what was the increase of the budget amount? Was it 5%? 4? We're at 5? Doing all right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue with line item B, which is finance report for January 2022.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Luis Bazan for the record, Bridge Director. We do have Carla Saavedra, Finance Director, to give you a report on finances for the bridge.
Thank you, Luis. Good afternoon. Carla Saavedra, Finance Director for the record. You should have your expenditure report snapshot in front of you. So just to go over page 1, total revenues overall year to date show an increase of 14.6% compared to last year. Now, remember that these figures have some adjustments that maybe Mr. Browen doesn't have in his schedule, his presentations. So these numbers might vary a little bit, but nothing material. Overall, collections are higher than what we budgeted, and they're higher than last year's. Total expenses as of January 31st, it's a total of $4.8 million. Everything within budget. There are some areas that you can see in page 2, line items that are a little bit over budget, but no major areas of concern. Funds are still available, and the total overall budget, it's still within the 33%. So overall, it's pretty good. We're within budget. At the very bottom is just a snapshot of the bridge construction proceeds that we've spent as of to date. So there's a total of $13.4 million that we spent in the three projects, which is the DAP 15 and 16 and the bridge expansion so far, which is 20%. So we still have funds remaining to spend. Then the last page is just a summary of what Mr. Browen went over. If you can see, is a more colorful snapshot of the crossings. And like he mentioned, the Southbound is the only one showing an increase of 11.14%. And the rest of the numbers we're showing a decrease, 1.49 for trucks and cars, 5.96 for Northbounds, and 18% decrease from cars compared to last year. But just to note that even though we're showing this decrease, our major revenue contributor is the Southbound. So with that positive, it's pretty much what the bridge wants to see, and that's what's bringing the collections increase from last year and even higher than budgeted. So if you have any questions.
Good question, Chairman, if I can, but you
Yeah.
haven't accounted for the increase in FY16 yet, right?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
All right.
Any questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
Yes, we'll continue with line item C, which is the engineer's report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, city administrators, we do have Maria Rangel, interim bridge city engineer, to give you a report status update on the bridge infrastructure projects.
Starting off with the project that we have under construction, we have the Bridge Northbound Lane Expansion and second BSIF exit. Next slide, please.
Can we get them up here on these screens? There we go.
So time to date, we're about 88% on time. Place to date, about 74%. The progress that has been made, next slide, please. So hopefully you can see circle number 1, which is on the lower left-hand corner there, that currently we have the installation of forms for the radiation portal monitors, the bullnose walls for those. The next circle over, circle 2, it's the installation of forms and reinforcement for booths at primary inspection. That's what's happening currently right now. The canopy itself was on hold while an issue is being addressed, but it'll continue. Circle number 3, which is the middle circle there, that's the concrete between the catwalk and the secondary inspection building that has been completed there. 4, the concrete repair, which is the topmost circle, that's ongoing. We're almost complete there. And then the last area of progress has been at the BSIF exit, which is circle number 5 that you see on the screen. And that's the erection of the steel canopy at the second BSIF exit. The next step moving forward is complete the work over at the primary inspection, which is in circle 1 and 2, and then also continue work at the BSIF exit, which is circle 5, the pavement that's going to go there, the base and subgrade. And right now we're on schedule still for a completion date of this spring of this year. The rest of our projects are in design, and the ones I want to cover on are DAP 16. So on here, you see there a schematic of the project, the dock phase 1, dock phase 2, and the ag lab. 95% of the PSNE has been received from engineer and is being submitted to TxDOT currently. The next project is the International Bridge expansion. For that one, can you go on to the next slide, please? For that one on the schedule, we're currently on track. We had the environmental scoping meeting with TxDOT back in January, and between now and the public meeting, which is scheduled for May 3rd, we'll be submitting to TxDOT all the technical environmental reports. So right now we're about 50% of those reports have been sent to TxDOT, and we're just waiting on their comments from them. So we're on schedule for that. And also we had a meeting yesterday, agency coordination with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps of Engineers, and the Coast Guards, because for 2 of those, for the Army Corps and the Coast Guards, we'll be needing a permit from them before we start construction in more than a year from now. So getting them involved now So we give them a heads up. It's to our benefit so that when they receive the permit application, they know what's going on. So we're way ahead on that already. So right now, just want to let you know we're on track. Going through environmental, 50% done for the technical reports, and so far response from TxDOT has been great. Great turnaround time. So hopefully, God willing, knock on wood, we'll make progress there.
When do you expect environmental to be completed by TxDOT?
So right now, it's still a far ways off, but of course, as we make more progress, we'll get a more realistic date. Right now, it's October next year, but like I said, we're doing great so far, and so hopefully it'll be sooner than that.
Chairman, if I wish, Luis, wasn't the project completion date at the end of 2023?
Yes.
Now we're at 2025?
Correct. So I can.
All right. Yeah.
So yes, and I knew that was going to come up when I saw the timeline when she sent us the presentation. So we can't go to environmental clearance. Remember, one of the things that happened here was we were kind of working backwards. So we got our presidential permit. Our presidential permit, we wouldn't have gotten it, on a regular schedule of events. Let's say we would have gone through the entire process, gotten the environmental clearance out of the way. That could have taken up to 2 years, and then get the actual presidential permit. So without an AFA, an advanced funding agreement from TxDOT, which that was fully executed back in December of 2021, you can't do anything. You can't move forward with what they call the scoping meeting for environmental. The scoping meeting took place, as Maria pointed out, in January. So when we saw the schedule, obviously we see it as an unacceptable schedule because it doesn't fit our timeline. And one of the reasons why we went forward and did everything we had to do to get our presidential permit was to bypass and skip a lot of these steps. Unfortunately, these are the federal government. Federal government comes back and says these are all the agencies we need to be looking at the actual document and the environmental document. But that's one of the things we're also coordinating with our governmental affairs already. So we started on this last month with hopes that we can, as soon as the review process starts within each of these federal agencies, we can actually get in there and get it out as soon as possible. So that is the worst case scenario right there. Obviously, our timeline, as we've been talking about, is 2023. But again, these are things that are out of our control as federal government. It's the TxDOT process also changed. One of the things I've seen is that even though it was easier on the federal side to get our presidential permit back in 2020, because we no longer had to go through the U.S. Department of State, we had to go directly through the White House. So that's what allowed us to get that a lot faster. Unfortunately, even though the federal government during that time had an executive order to get things done through the White House, that was not the case with TxDOT, and TxDOT did change their requirements. So based on those new TxDOT requirements, the time span is a lot longer than what we anticipated. But again, AFA needed to happen first. That just took place on December 2021. Scoping meeting after AFA took place in January. So this is where we stand right now. Worst case scenario. But again, we're already working our efforts internally with government affairs to see how fast we can get through all this process to get us to construction in a timely fashion. Another thing I do want to point out is that from the get-go, when we first started this project, we started in Mexico. We started in Mexico for a reason, because we saw their timeframes, their timelines accelerating the process. For example, the aduana. The aduana got done in 17, 18 months. And they were able to do it because they already have their construction company, their contractor on schedule. They can mobilize construction. That's what's happening right now. As a matter of fact, yesterday we met with Banobras. Banobras is the funding bank in Mexico, and they want to get started as soon as April with the groundbreaking. So
What's their timeline for completion?
same amount of time. So it's 14 months for full construction, 14 months of the entire bridge construction. Yeah, 14 months plus another 3, I'm sorry, to make it up to 17 months for the switching lanes. But we always knew, what I'm trying to say here is that we always knew that going into this, Mexico would be groundbreaking before we did, because their process is not our process. Our process is a lot longer. And the reason why our process is a lot longer now is because of the new TxDOT requirements.
Now, from the meetings that we had, it's not uncommon for them to start a project before us, on either side, and be completed before
Correct.
the other party is.
And it's happened,
is
and it's
done.
happened, and that has been brought up to our attention by our engineers on the US side.
But the delays historically have been more on the US side.
Correct.
More agencies,
Unfortunately.
More red tape.
Unfortunately, yes. There's just more bureaucracies, more steps to take. Right now, Mexico already has their contractor on board. We still have to go out for bids, for example. So that's,
So we got Hollis. Hollis will get it done for us.
I hate to say it like this, but we've had some tricks up our sleeves, so. And we've been able to get things done, in a timely fashion, from the get-go of this. Even though a lot of people didn't believe that we were gonna get our presidential permit, we did get it in a timely fashion. So we're hoping that the next set of steps are gonna happen, also in a timelier fashion than what they're on paper.
Where are we at? What percentage with construction documents, plans? Well, assuming you don't find anything new environmental.
With regards to the federal permit, that could have taken much longer.
That could have taken up to 3 years. If
I
you
know
ask
that-
Hollis, I think Hollis even had it 5 years, maybe. If you would have gone through the original process,
Right.
going through the US Department of State.
And I know leading into,
So again, that's in its basic format. We still have a lot of work to do, a lot of legwork, due diligence. We're already making big strides on that end. And so we're hoping again that we can reduce that timeline. Because again, when we first saw a timeline, we knew that it was an unacceptable timeline.
Any other questions?
Well, I guess I'll just add a comment to this. It should not really take that much longer because we have an existing bridge already. And we don't have any bad records has
Correct.
happened.
All that
With the
area has been
environment in the
environmentally cleared
past,
time
so-
and time again.
So that should
Mhm.
help the process. Not delay it.
And what we found out was that instead of needing what you would call an EIS, so don't ask me what it stands for, but that's a longer process for an environmental clearance. The EA is a shorter process, but that still puts us out. I also have to take into consideration when we brought in the US side engineering group and the consultants, that was almost a year later. When we finally officially brought them in, the city agreed to bring them on board. That was about a year later than when Mexico started. So that's about the time that we're looking at in difference here.
so it's standard procedure for them to extend things as they're going, but for the most part, we're still ahead of the game.
We've made great strides and we've actually brought down the time frame or decreased the time frame to get things done.
Right.
Specifically because we were able to get our presidential permit, we have the funding in place. And then we also started with some of the environmental elements behind the scenes with the environmental consultants prior to us even getting the AFA. So a lot of those things were already being worked on at least 6 months prior to.
Any other questions?
Well, they pulled the presidential permit on a Hail Mary, so I'm sure they can do something.
Well, the city of Pharr is known to get things done, so we're not gonna stop now.
The election helped too, so
What's that?
the election helped too.
A lot of things lined up.
Ahí viene
The
otra,
stars did
Carlos,
align,
but-
so it doesn't mean that the stars won't align again.
All right.
All right?
I
Any
guess
other
if
further
there's no more
questions on that?
questions, I guess you're ready in your director's report?
Pretty much, yes.
Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Maria. Thank you. Yes, for my director's report, I do have a couple of reports. First and foremost, one of the things that we're talking infrastructure, we're talking building for the future. We've also been working with governmental affairs on letters to the federal government for funding to see if we can get some future funding pockets for future projects as we move forward, right? We're not done with our bridge expansion. We're not done with DAP 15 and DAP 16. That's only the beginning. We still have to go in there and get our current POE, port of entry, up to par, meaning we have to modernize it, similar to what Mexico did, because that is aging infrastructure. And also we have a pavement assessment that we've been working on and we've been meeting on. That's for the entire existing bridge, so that we can, all the deferred maintenance on it. And then further than that, we have to just upgrade the technology, upgrade the current infrastructure inside the port as it stands right now, because again, it is aging infrastructure. So we've been working with the governmental affairs on that. So because of that, also, we wanted to invite Cynthia Garza, governmental affairs for the city, to give us an update on the infrastructure bill. And she's here today, and she's going to give us a brief on that.
Hello, everyone. For the record, my name is Cynthia Garza Reyes, and I'm the Director of External Relations. So to give you a quick overview of the infrastructure bill that was passed in November of 2021, it was a bill that was passed made up of two different acts. One of the act is the Build Back Better Act, and then you also had the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that were combined for a total of $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion that was going anywhere on the spectrum for job creation, all the way up to transportation surface projects and also port of entry type infrastructure projects. So the way they have broken down this funding is in specific areas. So in terms of time, we're obviously just going to go over the ones that concern our port of entry. In terms of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we're seeing 1.2 trillion that's being invested into that pot alone. From that pot alone, it's then being created into sub pots. So you have 110 billion that are coming strictly for roads and bridges. In terms of what that means, it could be anywhere from repair to actual brick and mortar infrastructure that will be under DOT. The other pot is specifically a $17 billion pot that will be specifically for ports. Now, what do we mean by that? That pot is still kind of a gray area. And the reason I say that is because there's already discussion that half of that pot is going to go towards the Army Corps of Engineer. And so with that, we don't know if they're going to determine what ports need funding. The reason I say that is because it's very similar to the way CBP works currently with GSA for certain outdated bridges. And I use that as an example because when they get large pots like that, for instance, GSA works for the governmental agency like CBP that says, basically, tell me what bridges are outdated. What bridges have not had any type of infrastructure for the past 25, 30 plus years. And unfortunately, those bridges ended up, they get first dibs basically at the funding. And so we don't know exactly how that's going to work, but we're already working with our members to see if there's any potential verbiage that's coming out of those specific agencies, so we can have an idea if for instance, this pot, if we'd be able to tap on that without it being an actual competitive grant that's discretionary funding. So those are the two pots. On the Build Back Better Act, there's another pot for $5 billion. This is specifically going towards supply chain investments in terms of ways to safeguarding our economy. Again, this is broken down into actual grants as well. So there are specific grants that the city is looking into right now. A lot of these grants are just being rolled out in February. Some are coming out in March. And so it's very gray in terms of what the eligibility standards are going to be. But what we are seeing already is that a lot of these funding opportunities that are coming out, they're basically putting funding back into already created pots that are there. And what I mean by that is, for instance, one of the larger pots that's been known throughout the years is now called the RAISE grant, which has been known for surface infrastructure type projects, a couple of bridge, railroad type projects. But historically, this pot has been there since 2008 when we went through the recession and Congress decided to pump money into this. So when it was introduced, everyone in this region knew it as the Tiger Grant, a very, very competitive grant. But now they've switched it to the RAISE grant. So what we're seeing is an additional 500 million that's being pumped into this for a total of 1.5 billion. Now, some of the things that we're having to comb through is in terms of looking at the bridge projects in terms of what is a viable project. Is it our current projects that we're still funding through DAP 15 and DAP 16 that are in construction, or is it the bridge expansion project? And we have to weigh that according to what the eligibility standards are, because if the RAISE grant is asking that I need a project ready, that's shovel ready in 18 months, and it has already gone through an environmental clearance, then we're going to have to wait and actually apply for the grant later on. So those are things that we're basically combing through right now. So aside from the RAISE grant, there's another new grant program that's been released. It's called the National Infrastructure Project Assistance Grant. Again, these are major mega infrastructure projects. Do we have an actual eligibility standard on it? No, we don't. In fact, we're still waiting for the description to come in, but that's an additional 5 billion in that pot. Aside from that, there's another port infrastructure development grant that is out there. It's always been historically a smaller grant, and now through the infrastructure bill, they've actually pumped in a lot more funding. So now it's actually being seen more within the communities and so on. That's another one. We're anticipating that it should be coming in late February. So we, again, will be working with Hollis's team to make sure we understand the eligibility standards for that one as well. Aside from that, another one is infra. I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard of infra grants, things like that. Again, this is a historical pot that actually was created back in 2016 from one of the first past transportation bills in 20 plus years. So all they did was they took this same pot and they basically have pumped additional funding in there. Again, this is another grant that we're looking at. At this point, it's still up in the air in terms of eligibility standards and so on. And it's another grant project that obviously we're going to continue working through. When it comes to all of these funding, we have actually applied for Tiger in the past with DAP 15 and DAP 16 projects. It's a consortium of people, meaning it's not only the governmental side, it's not only Hollis's team, but it's also the bridge team that comes in. It's also the engineer that's taking head of it for the technical side and so on. So it's a group that comes together to apply for these grants. And because these grants are, you're talking about multi-million-dollar grants, they're very, very competitive. And historically, a lot of these grants like infra, the RAISE grant, formerly known as Tiger, a lot of that money continues to go to the northeast quadrant of the United States. Seaports. A lot of them are seaports.
And sorry to interrupt you, but here's a misconception that I had based on some of the other boards that I sit on in relating to produce industry. But the misconception was that funding was going to be allocated now directly to land ports. But
No,
that's not the case.
it's not the case. It's all considered to be discretionary funding, meaning it has to be a competitive grant mechanism behind it. If it was allocated directly to bridges, then that would be more of a formula type funding mechanism that would be infused directly. But even if they were, for instance, let's say they decide to infuse money to land ports of entry, they're not going to give it directly to a port. They're going to infuse it into an agency, and then the agency, like GSA, would work in combination with Homeland Security, meaning CBP, and decide which are the ports that are most needed of infrastructure.
So this continues to be the problem. I go back to the misconception because within the industry, seaports are a huge competitor for land ports, obviously, right? So if seaports, East Coast you mentioned, West Coast is huge as well. Florida's big, even Galveston. If they automatically get funding for infrastructure, for technology, the land ports are at a huge disadvantage. Because to be quite honest, at least with the ports that we've worked with historically along Texas-Mexico border, they're very behind when it comes to a grant process. And you can probably go more into detail, but the misconception continues that Build Back Better was going to be kind of a fix-all for land ports, seaports, airports, but
What they're doing, what Build Back Better is doing in this is it's opening up the doors in terms of the grant process. For the longest time, a lot of these grants would say that yes, bridges qualify, ports of entry qualify. But when in actuality, a lot of the projects that were getting awarded, because they were more seen as transportation grants at the time, again, because they were passed in the transportation bill, is that we were competing against surface type projects. So let's just say if you have an interstate project that a coalition is supporting or that the state of Texas is supporting, more than likely that interstate project is going to rank higher than a port of entry project. Now, when they say that they're infusing funding, they're infusing funding across the board, whether you're a land, whether you're a sea, or whether you're a pedestrian type bridge. And I say that because even if they infused money, like what we discussed and use the example of GSA, if you look at the projects that GSA has in terms of ports of entry right now and how they rank them, it's all over the place. And meaning some are pedestrian, like Brownsville's pedestrian bridge that hasn't had any type of upkeep since prior to the 1970s. Or El Paso, that's another pedestrian bridge as well. They're all over in terms of some are pedestrian, some are land, and some are seaports in terms of the direct infusions that we may see.
so the follow-up is the grant process is going to be the only way to continue to get federal funding for land ports.
Yes. Yes. At this point, yes. But then again, it then raises the question in terms of making sure that our projects are shovel ready. Meaning, if the grant asks that they need to be environmentally cleared, then they have to be environmentally cleared, because more than likely you're going to get a more confirmed date in terms of shovel ready. But again, it's still very early and we're combing through everything right now. Any questions?
So it's a total of about 4 to 5 different grants that you were mentioning right now?
Yes.
Wow.
Massive grants, yes.
But that's just with the current, with the Build Back Better.
This is, yes,
Initiative.
just through the infrastructure bill.
So if we don't qualify through the grant, what may get us qualify if we have anything that's shovel ready?
Mhm.
Do anything that we have?
That's one
qualify
of
for
the
that?
things, that's one of the things that we're going through in terms of the bridge projects, because just because the bridge expansion might not be ready for now, it doesn't mean that we can't still potentially pursue these same grants with our DAP 15 and DAP 16, because technically they are shovel ready. So this is where we're looking at it, because then we have to look at it in terms of, okay, if we were to apply for our DAP 15 and DAP 16 projects that are currently underway, can we use reimbursement mechanisms? Because technically the city's already allocated additional funding to it. So those are things that we have to work through to make sure that it doesn't look that we are supplanting it anyway.
I guess part of the reason I was emphasizing the seaports, and I'm glad you brought it up, was because a couple of years ago, many companies started direct sourcing projects directly out of Mexico seaports, directly to the East Coast, directly to Florida, directly to the West Coast, Long Beach. And they were pilot programs, but they were very aggressive pilot programs backed by millions of dollars just as a pilot program. The objective, to avoid the land ports. Why? Because seaports are a huge advantage when it comes to freight, when it comes to just overall cost. Years later, many companies have scaled back. I'm speaking private sector. Many companies have scaled back and said, you know what, they work, they don't work. So the point to that, the land ports continue to be at a huge disadvantage. I'm not just speaking for this port, I'm saying all of them. But we're ahead of the curve because we have this department that's out there aggressively looking for the grants, because at whether it's one of the national boards that I sit on or the regional ones, when it comes to this, there's a huge misconception of of what is actually is there, and everything's spent unfortunately politically because everybody has their own agenda. But when it comes to it, realistically, in the private sector, land ports are at a huge disadvantage. But if you look at just infrastructure and technology, there's a reason why this bridge continues to surge. I mean, look, we're at 21,000 crossings in ag in the month of January. I sent out a memo to staff about some shortages that are to come in the coming months, and the land ports are going to serve. Pharr in particular is going to serve as a huge filler for the supply gap through the summer. And what does that mean for the end consumer? It means products will continue to be available. But it all comes back to funding, because there's other ports that are ready to go, but they don't have funding. They have permits, but they don't have funding. So for my sake, thanks for clearing that up, because like I said, even at some of the national boards that I've been in, they still don't understand clearly what this means.
Anything else?
Are there any other questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for that report. Next thing on my director's report is, as everybody knows here, we're members of the Mid-Valley Customs Brokers Association. That's just one of many associations that we're members of in transportation and logistics and customs brokerage, even some of the different sectors that we service. So today we just wanted to bring up Mr. Robert Vale. He is the new president. We just got appointed to the Mid-Valley Customs Brokers Association. We just wanted to introduce him. And I know Freddie's been working side by side or alongside this organization for a number of years. We've seen some different people come and go. Those people will still remain on the board, but there's been a change in leadership. So we just wanted to introduce you to Robert and give you a little bit of rundown of what they're working on. Robert.
Hello,
Hello.
good afternoon.
Hello.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the meeting. First time here. Thank you, Mr. Bazan. As you all know, you all are members of the Brokers Association, and we appreciate everything you do for us. Yes, we did have a new board elected in January. I am the new president. I've been a member for about 3 years, about as long as I've moved back down. I'm originally from McAllen, lived in Houston for 20 years, very familiar with the seaports. I worked for Maersk Line 20 years, so they are a private company and they own quite a bit of terminals. So yeah, they are a big advantage to have privately owned seaports. Just to let you know who we have on the board, it's Antonio Rivera. He was on the board last year. He is the VP of Maquila. Armando Flores is the VP of Produce. Isaac Mendiola is the treasurer, and Megan Roser is the secretary. Rico Roser is a relative of hers, so he's been a long-time member. Our goal is basically to engage the broker community. We've had a few meetings since the elections. I haven't had any complaints at all about the bridge. I think everything's running real smoothly. Most of the feedback I've been getting is broker specific, so nothing in general. My goal is basically to organize the board and organize the members to develop outreach. I know you all are members of STAC, so if I ever get any feedback that we need more ag inspectors, we can definitely use STAC to get that for you to expedite the crossings. One of the things I am working on in the board, the Brokers Association, is partnering with STC to do a certification program along with Customs help and blessing, is to start a certified customs specialist and certified export specialist certification program with STC. They're looking to kick off March 24th at STC. They're looking to us to gather an invite list of people that would want to participate in the kickoff. I don't know if any of you all would like to be there, but if you do, please reach out. We'll invite you there. I think they're also looking at inviting the maquila industry as well as the Mexican Broker Association. I'm based out of Rio Grande City, so I'll be reaching out to Camargo and Miguel Alemán, Mexican brokers, and some of our members will help with the Reynosa and Matamoros. Basically, that's it. I don't know if you all have any questions. No?
Just a comment, I think, how many years have we been members? A couple of years, right? 5 years? 5 years, yeah, just if there's anything that we can do to help to, promote trade, I mean,
Sure.
please let us know.
Oh, absolutely.
We should be working closer, so anything we can do.
I have a copy of the contacts of the board. I don't know if I can give it to one of your people and they can distribute it to you all. That way you at least have, that way you have the. Sure, okay.
Your STC program, is that for like just the training, or is that like to generate somebody with an associates to
Yeah,
work
so
on the
they're
import
looking for
export?
participation from anybody with the freight forwarders, transportation companies, customs brokers. Basically, the programs for the certified customs specialists is just to get them familiarized with the harmonized codes, informed compliance, assessments of duties, marking of imported goods, kind of all the basics, right? And customs is interested in that because they see discrepancies, and this is to help kind of clear all that up. Same with the export program. It's basically export controls, bills of lading, NVOCC, export documentation, all that stuff is what they go over. It's a 6-month program. So we're excited about that.
Great. All right. Us too. We need help. We need people to.
Yes, and
know what they're doing.
Maquilas seem to be very interested in it too. I think they've actually reached out that they want to participate in this. So that's a good thing.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Next thing, just a couple more things here on the director's report. So as you know, every year we put out a trade number study, right? And we've been commissioning this study also since 2012, 2013. What happens with the study, it's January through December. Our fiscal year, our year is obviously October through September. So one of the things we've been working on with Eddie Gutierrez, our financial consultant and analyst, is having the information available also for crossings and revenues calendar year, not just fiscal year. Reason why this is so important, just last week, we got the new trade numbers. So even though we don't have the actual publication done yet and printed and in our hands yet, we do get these things a month after the information has been not available, but a month after it has been put together. So for example, in January, we got the end of year for calendar year 2021. So back in 2019, our trade value with Mexico and the rest of the world was about $36 billion. And we've seen it in our 411. We've seen it everywhere we go. That's one of our selling points, $36 billion in trade. With the pandemic in 2020, that number across the board, not just in Pharr, for any port, including seaports that we were just talking about, went down to 33 billion. So there was a loss of about 9 to 10% in the value of imports and exports due to the dip and the downfall of the automotive industry back with the pandemic. So looking at the future in 2021, that was for 2020, 33 billion. We went from 36 to 33 billion. So last year we said, okay, we're going to have to find a way to just keep promoting, to keep, the economy has helped out a lot as well, and things have shifted. And if anything, as I've said, even with the pandemic, we continue to grow. So right now, as of November, our trade value was at 38 billion. And if you go back to some of the reports or some of the articles that came out back in November, December, we were estimating that we're going to be at about 39 to 40 billion in trade by the end of the calendar year. So right now, based on the current numbers, we're almost at 42 billion. I just wanted to report that to you because I think it's an outstanding a testament to what the bridge is doing, to what the economy, how it's shifting, how things are going to continue. As Tony was mentioning, products are still coming across. A business is going to be conducted. And I just wanted to share some of that information with you, and then also call Eddie to give you the crossings report for the entire calendar year. So you can see how that growth does mesh. It does go together with our trade numbers. And I think it's something we're going to have to start putting together on a year-to-year basis going forward. So if we were doing $1 billion year after year for the past 5-6 years to 2012, now we're over almost at $41.77 billion in trade value with Mexico and the rest of the world. And with that, just real quick, so just some of the highlights from the latest report is that trade with Mexico rose by almost 30%, 28.49%, and also trade with Canada rose, and that rose by 126.66%. So that's basically in line with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. It falls in line with that. The other thing on the export side, so LNG, other petroleum gases, as we've known, we've been growing since 2017. That came out to 94.96% growth on the export side. That's an export that goes from the U.S. to Mexico. With gasoline and other fuels, that rose by 180% for 2021. So we continue to see a lot of more. If you noticed on the axle counts, on the 6 axle counts, those are your tankers, and we've seen a huge increase in those in the last few months, the last few years. Motor vehicle parts still kind of not all there. We're at 12.81%, but it's still rising. Insulated wire, mostly on the technology side of things, and also automotive sector, you're looking at 30.33%, and on the computer chips on the technology side, almost 40% growth for last year. Then we look at the import side. You know, the ones we service, the sectors that we service, again, as I just mentioned, is the technology, the automotive, and the produce, obviously, and also in up and coming is the medical industry. We've been seeing a big increase in the last 2-3 years in the medical industry. So let me just go over that real quick. So TVs and computer monitors rose by 31.22%. Produce, avocados, I know it's a big issue right now with the halt that's taking place. It's out of our control completely. It's a federal issue. That's 31%, but that also includes dates and figs, pineapples, and some other sourced products there. Strawberries are also on the up and up at almost 31%. And then on the automotive on the automotive, insulated wire and cable rose by 53%, and the medical rose by 26.16%. So overall, just wanted to share that because again, we're going to wait to have our published publication, our printed publication, and every month, every 3 months, every quarter, every 6 months, that information becomes obsolete, but it's a great tool for us. It's a marketing profile, like I've always mentioned, and it's a great tool for us to continue pushing forward and attracting some of these sectors that we already are servicing through this port, but also attracting new sectors, new commodities, new products to increase our trade value. So with that, let me call Eddie real quick to give you a rundown of how things are looking for the calendar year with crossings and revenues.
Thank you. For the record, Eddie Gutierrez with Bluestone Capital Solutions. I'd just like to add a little bit to what Luis was saying here about the supply chain fallout and the shift that's happening. There was actually a study that was done here recently, and on that study, it was saying that the seaports of entries from Mexico were going to be the big winners from all this fallout that's happening. So you're starting to see that through the Ocean Pacific side of it, and you're starting to see that through the Atlantic side of it. Also, it highlighted Texas, as Texas being a big winner for the land ports. And Texas, it specifically named South Texas as being a big winner. So, you know, from all the big winnings that we're having with the numbers that we're having, I think we're going to expect to see a lot more from that, and we're going to be able to see those numbers as we go through them. Okay, so this is a calendar year that we're reporting on. The calendar years basically that we looked at 2019, 20, and 21, and then we looked at 1 month for 22 on a calendar year. The calendar year is going to run from January through December, and here we are looking at the vehicles. And as you can see, COVID tells a big story when COVID started. As you can see in April of 2020, which is a yellow one, you can see the big dip when COVID happened, and you can see that affecting every single graph is going to be affected here. This is just the cars, but you can see how the cars were effective starting in March and how they dipped down in April. But as you can see, the numbers for the vehicles, they continue to take a dip from 19. You see the highlighted in January, February, and March, and you start seeing them shrinking down all the way to the orange one in January there. This is the southbound trucks crossing. Again, you see the growth as we're starting to become a central hub for commercial trucking, and you're seeing that in 2020 again in March and April we start taking a dip, Again, it starts going up for 2021 in the calendar year. And then you see the big increase in January there, which is where we're getting a lot of the trade that's coming back. Here is a combination. The combination is reporting obviously the combined vehicles and the trucks going southbound. You see that for 2022, it's down, but it's down mostly because of the vehicles as they have been down. This is the northbound truck crossings. Those have been on the rise. They've been pretty much. They've been pretty. I mean, take that back. They've been flat through 2021, and they've continued to be flat for 2022 here in January. But it seems now like what's happening is we used to think that the route the truck crossing going northbound was a lot higher, and now it's the opposite. It's the southbound truck crossing that's becoming a lot higher. Here recently, it's starting to see that trend. Here is a combined south and northbound truck crossing. As you can see, the increase that continues to increase throughout the years. And then you see the revenues, as you continue to see the revenues started to increase. And you started to see that shift increase as the supply chain is really falling apart and Mexico is really gaining ground on the seaports. And then you see where South Texas is starting to gain a lot of ground on that with the infrastructure. And one of the things that they did highlight in that study was they were highlighting that the infrastructure from Mexico into the U.S. is already in place. And what we're doing in preparation with the bridge expansion, the DAP 15 and 16, that we're getting ready for that shift to happen. And I think we're going to benefit out of that shift quite a bit. So you can see it in our revenues, you can see it in our crossings, in our truck crossings, our commercials, crossings that we have. And that's the presentation. It's just changing it from the physical. Any questions?
No, thank you. Just a quick question, Luis. On exports, what was, or Fred or Luis, what was the biggest export that had popped up in the
Export, oil
last
and gas.
couple of weeks? Oil and gas.
So basically, gasoline and what they consider, within that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's a cluster of different products, byproducts of gasoline, 180%. The next thing was LNG was at 90%.
Didn't Pemex
And
fall
then-
already?
No.
Pemex?
Not yet. So they've been going through some issues in Mexico with that, but
Yeah.
it hasn't happened yet.
Oh, went up. I thought they
Yeah,
had already
yeah.
fallen. They hadn't yet?
No.
Shut
It's still deregulated. So there's still, private entities, private business can still ship petroleum products to Mexico.
Oh.
Yeah, 94% on LNG. That concludes my director's report.
Any other questions?
I have a comment only.
Sure.
Luis, I've had a couple of customers that, truck drivers that they've been complaining about on the Mexican side. I know it's not on
Mhm.
our side, but it's a concern that they're spending a lot of time and they're waiting in line for hours. And the hold is on the Mexican side on the aduana.
Mhm.
And they don't know what the issue is. And once they cross the bridge is wide open.
Sure.
Do you know
So
anything what's
there's a
going
set
on
of
on the Mexican
of
side?
issues that have been taking place, and they started last year with the PITA, the program, the automated program. That was one of them. That's basically a paperless, manless system similar to our, I guess, ACE program, right? So not all the companies are in compliance, or they were thinking that it was just going to go away, and they decided to hold back on it. So what happens with those trucks, for example, when they get there, they have to be held back or put aside because they cannot go. But the biggest issue right now is the entire restructuring of the Mexican government. So it used to be AGA, the Administración General de Aduanas. That is being restructured to be ANAM, which is the Asociación Nacional de Aduanas Mexicanas. So with this whole restructuring, you have new personnel, new leadership. Our administrator just left on Monday. Monday morning was his last day. He had only been here for about a year, maybe a little bit less than a year. So overall, it's the restructuring. We did reach out because we did get the complaints as well. We have been hearing about this. There's also another program in place that they're trying to implement to facilitate things, to make it more efficient. But as with any program, with anything that's new technology, or not using enough personnel, or not having enough lanes open, even though you have the infrastructure in place, these are the obstacles that they have to face. So in a nutshell, that's what's happening right now. They're restructuring their whole organization at the federal level.
So it has nothing to do with just on the Pharr International Bridge.
No,
That's
sir. No,
correct.
this
It
is
has to do
nationwide.
across nation.
So like when the ACE system, I make the point where when the ACE system goes down, the automated commercial environment goes down on the US side, it's all US ports of entry, land ports of entry. It's not just Pharr. And that's one thing that I think we need to do a better job of getting out there and getting the word out and ensuring we do the outreach. Because I think a lot of people think that it's isolated to just one port of entry or just being Pharr. We do have a lot of traffic, but we're not at the percent capacity that we need to be at yet. But these are some of the issues we've been facing. Yes, sir.
Going back to what Robert was mentioning, we need a couple of people in all sectors of the industry to take a little course on the documentation that you need for crossing. Sometimes you got the transportation guys complaining, sometimes you got the shippers, the receivers, but nobody really understands the process within their organization. They just know what they're supposed to do, but they don't understand the rest of the.
Correct.
And to add to what Luis was saying, we were back in Mexico in November.
December and December.
Beginning of November, and Aduanas is separating from SAT and is becoming their own entity. So they have to basically they're creating a new entity, and all the employees have to be trained and to the new
setup,
process, and then
processes and
they're assigning
policies.
new administrators and stuff like that. And that's what's taking place
And
at the
when they
moment.
started that shift, the aduanas became militarized. So the last administrator we had, the one that again just left a couple of days ago, he was a general in the Mexican army. Might be a bad thing, might be a good thing. We still don't know. So anyway, that's one of the things, some of the things we've been contending with, but it's just a whole total restructuring of efforts over there in Mexico.
Please, just to highlight what Chairman mentioned, the point for Robert, since he's still here. Last year, Bridge put together a cheat sheet for importers. It was shared within the industry, and what we found was, to his point, I want to say 75% of the issues that we were seeing with delays were caused by shipper error or exporter error, and or they used no offense to you directly, right? But a custom broker that, if they handled maquila, they handled produce, and they didn't know how to prepare the documentation, right? That's an operational error at the private sector level that, unfortunately, the ports, they want to blame the ports. To Larry's point, the drivers that came to him and mentioned those things. But I think if we work closer, we'll be able to. Luis?
He gave us the top 3 or 4 issues he's seen from the broker side. We've already distributed that amongst the members. One of them is trucks in line and there's no entry. So that causes a bottleneck. A couple other issues. We're working on.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. And we've had our set of issues on the southbound side as well, because, for example, 2 weeks ago, we had another Mexican holiday. And what happens in Mexico, they close early, everybody goes home. So we're shut down. We lose half a day of service. It's unfortunate. And we've been after that for many years. But with this whole restructuring, we're hoping that we can make bigger strides and bigger efforts to try and get matching hours of operations between US and Mexico, because we've been pushing for that for many years. And speaking of ACE, tomorrow we do have another ACE update through our Bridge Connect session. Reason why, again, even though we've been pushing ACE for years, I think we started in 2014. The program was already in place. When I first started doing Bridge Connect back then, we were already pushing it out with our ACE ambassadors at the CBP level, but still not all companies are in full compliance. So we had to continue doing that outreach and educating our trade industry to be in compliance. That will help them speed up the process.
Final point with the Bridge Connects.
Mhm.
During the pandemic, and we saw the numbers dip.
Yes.
But Bridge Connects continued.
Oh, yes. We've never stopped. As a matter of fact, during the pandemic, we started doing them weekly.
and the traveling continued, MOUs were signed. You know, the
Mhm.
chairman was at the most recent one.
Mhm.
But we mentioned the exports growing with petroleum, gas.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why the increase happened because everybody kept working, right? So we didn't just stay as a produce port.
Mhm.
Now it's diverse to a much more different sector,
Correct.
different industries, right?
sir.
Which is huge.
Absolutely.
So you guys are doing a really, really awesome job with those bridge connects.
Thank you. And that's also our partner, our numbers guy in Miami, Ken Roberts. You know, if you go online right now to the city's YouTube page, you can find a quarterly report that we did specifically on the oil and gas sector or the energy sector, and specifically talking about what you're saying right now. Had continued to grow even regardless of the pandemic.
Right.
Okay. Moving
Thank you.
forward, administrative.
We'll move to administrative, and we need an approval on the minutes for January 19, 2022.
Motion?
Motion by Mr. Martinez, second by Mr. Hernandez. All in favor, say aye. Line item B, discussion and action, if any, on 2022 Index Reynosa membership renewal for 1814 with 40 cents. We need a motion.
A motion?
Motion by Mr. Martinez, second by Mr. Hernandez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
A motion by Mr. Hernandez, second by Mr. Martinez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.